Welcome to a press conference hosted by the Poor People's Campaign, co-anchored by the Kairos Center and Repairs of the Breach. My name is Lauren Zayu, and I'm with the Kairos Center here, and I'm offering some brief instructions before we get going. In the event you are pressed and have a question that you would like to submit for today's press conference, please do so using the Q&A feature in Zoom. The questions will be read aloud at the end of our program to be answered by our guests. In the event you want more information on the Poor People's Campaign, please visit www.poorpeoplescampaign.org and also follow on Twitter at @UniteThePoor. In order to begin today's conference, we will have a brief video explaining how we are here and why our advocacy has brought us to this moment in order to fight for our democracy in regards to voting rights. We'll have a brief video and then followed by opening remarks from Bishop Barber, one of the co-chairs of the campaign, and then we will begin our program. Thank you all for joining us today.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. A new, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
Together, we can change the world until the poor are lifted, the workers are paid, the sick are healed, the vote is not suppressed, police killing is stopped, land and water is not poisoned, war is not pushed, promoted and promulgated, humanity is respected, children are protected, civil rights, labor rights, human rights are never neglected until these things are actualized. We've got work to do, and if we do it together, if the rejected work together, generations yet unborn will rise up and remember us for the work we did, and together we will change the nation.
I know
Let me welcome all of you to this very important press conference. It should be unnecessary in the 21st century, but our deadline is victory, and we don't intend to ever stand down. I want to thank Pastor Dunn particularly for inviting us to this historic church that Dr. King and others used to preach from this pulpit. People who knew what it meant to stand and to stand and to stand and to stand again. I want to welcome all of the media that are online and those who are in this space together. This is the 152nd anniversary of the ratification of the 15th Amendment. The 15th Amendment. The 15th Amendment that declares the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, previous condition of servitude, and that the Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. But when that piece of legislation, after a lot of fighting, was ratified, it was not just about voting. It was about citizenship and economics, about the former slaves being able to join with many poor and low wealth white people who had figured out that they had been fleeced, misused and abused by the Southern aristocracy. It was a tremendous, tremendous victory, not only for men at the time, but it grew. Somebody's phone is dinging. Is it mine? But it grew to include men and women. We're going to start with West Virginians. I want the media to know we were invited here by West Virginians and New Yorkers who are making a demand and a call on Senator Schumer and Senator Manchin. Toward the end, I'm going to read a letter that we're all signing that has already been sent to Senator Manchin and Senator Schumer. I'm going to put some things in context, but the why we are here and why white and Black people in West Virginia and white and Black people in New York have said we are coming together, we're building a movement. We don't ever believe that the fight is over until justice comes. I'm going to be here for a few days. Pastor Dunn has been so gracious to invite us to this historic pulpit, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris and myself, to preach on Sunday. But right now, I want to ask Pastor Paul Dunn, our pastor, First Baptist Church here in Charleston, if he would come and be clear about why West Virginians have gathered here and their position on the position their senator is taking. And then following him will be Pam Garrison, Tri-Chair of the West Virginia Poor People's Campaign. And then Jean Eversmore will come. And then Stuart Aycock, Coordinating Member of the West Virginia Poor People's Campaign and a labor union member. Then we will have, the Right Reverend Lark Munsey of the Holy Trinity Anglican Church in Kermit, West Virginia, who has a word, I believe he's online, am I correct? And then Eddie Burke, who's the retired field director of the United Mine Workers Association. The Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. And then from New York, Adam Thiessen, low-wage worker and coffee barista organizing a union of coffee workers in New York. And the Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, Middle Church in New York. Why we cannot separate the issue of voting rights, the issue of economic adjustments and investments of the poor. Each of them will come in their own way in 2 to 2.5 minutes. And then before we sign the letter, I want to lay out a few things about in the larger sphere of why we must come together. Reverend Dr. Dunn. That's right. Y'all can respond.
Thank you, Bishop Barber, and thank you for joining us in this great state of West Virginia, because a moral crime has been committed and continues to be inflicted on this state and our country by our sitting Senator, Joe Manchin. It is not a coincidence that we are convening this press conference in this public place called Sanctuary. First Baptist has always been a church known for its fight for the least, the lost, and the left out. Senator Manchin, there's soaring numbers of West Virginians, your state, living in poverty. Soaring numbers of West Virginia, your state, living and dying in poverty, desperately needing assistance, and you hold their fate and their destiny at stake by withholding the vote for the Build Back Better. It's a shame and a travesty that so many have to suffer because of the inaction of one person, or the feeling that one or helping those who desperately need the help would be enabling or making them feel like they have an entitlement mentality. You co-authored voting rights legislation and won't even support it now.
Wow.
The fundamental right to vote has been an attack in this country against the poor, Black, and brown citizens for years, and we demand protection of voting rights for all to be a priority. I heard you say on the silver screen in an interview that the citizens of West Virginia you have spoken to understand your position. Well, I promise you that this church could be filled with West Virginians who oppose what you are doing and will voice their opinions because we want Build Back Better and we want voting rights protection. Senator Manchin, the Micah mandate and the Holy Writ declares, what does God require? To do justice,
yes, sir.
Love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. Your position reeks of injustice. Your position does not exemplify mercy on hundreds and thousands of people who expect you to deliver what is needed in this state. And most of all, your position does not represent the love of God. It does not present the love of God.
No, sir.
When the rich and able and affluent unjustly treat the poor and infirm wrong. I close by saying welcome everyone to First Baptist Church, but I also want to say to Senator Manchin, the Bible says, come let us reason together. Taking a position that the BBB is dead is not reasoning together.
No, sir.
Refusing to explain your position and find grounds of compromise is not reasoning together. We want to build back better. We need voting rights legislation passed and protected. We need you to represent all West Virginians. God bless you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Reverend Dunn. I'm Pam Garrison. I'm one of the hundreds of West Virginians that has been on Senator Manchin's doorstep in Washington and here in West Virginia. I would just like to ask my senators, all of them, how do y'all sleep at night? You know, here in West Virginia, we live in the mountains, but we don't live in a cave. We've watched foreign powers being used to influence our elections. We've watched the authoritarian and fascism pitch raised to the heights of an insurrection that even some of our West Virginians joined in. We've watched the coup on our democracy that's still ongoing in our state houses, even here in West Virginia.
That's right.
West Virginia is number one for one thing, Mr. Manchin. Our citizens are number one for joining the military. They stand and die. They give their life, their limbs, their minds to protect our democracy,
Mama.
to give us the right to vote, to defend our Constitution, the very thing every one of y'all stood up with your hand on a Bible and swore that you would do. Our military does it. So I'm asking you, all we ask of you is your vote, to have the same valor they do. Use your vote to take and protect us, to protect our democracy.
That's right.
And like I said, the only thing I want to know is, how do you sleep at night?
Mm.
Thank you.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, West Virginia and the rest of the United States for being here, because we are all in this together. We just happen to have the man that is playing his fiddle while we burn, or something like that.
That's right.
Build Back Better plan. We want the Build Back Better plan now. That is what we'll be talking about with Manchin and with Schumer. We are going to the original Build Back Better plan. My information, I think, is correct. No problem if it's wrong. You know it, get it straightened out. Fully restore the Voting Rights Act. End the filibuster.
That's right.
End the filibuster.
That's right.
We need a $15 minimum wage, $15. We know that some of the low-wage employees have learned this because they have been withholding their abilities until they got a reasonable pay.
That's right.
Corporations haven't had a problem doing it. They've done it. If they don't do it, we don't work. Simple as that. Expand the earned income tax.
That's right. That's right.
There are so many things that just don't make any sense that you don't get them. The money from this is going to come from the billionaires and the multimillionaires,
That's right.
some of whom are here in West Virginia. There's another interesting one and very important one that's had a very positive effect on families and got a negative one now, and that's the child tax credit.
That's right.
The child tax credit. The child tax credit has been able to actually take away much of the stress
That's right.
that people have.
That's right.
And generally, these are mothers. Generally, these are single mothers.
Working.
Those of us who are older know what the term rob Paul to pay Peter means. That's exactly what people are doing. Do you pay the electric bill or do you go buy food?
That's right.
Do you do this or do you go buy that? Do you live in a hotel for a couple of days because your electricity has been turned off and it is cold, it's freezing? That's what the child tax credit has been able to do. It's been able to give students things they needed for their education. We know here in West Virginia how bad the broadband is. How can you do school work when you don't have access? That's what that has done. And it's been like up to $300 per child. There is no reason,
No, no.
no reason to not take care of poor people.
That's right.
No reason.
No, no.
Get it back in. Do what you need to do. And we expect to see you, Senator Manchin, in DC, or any one of your offices here in West Virginia. I think you have 3 now. And we expect to see you, Senator Schumer. We do not quit until we win.
That's right.
Victory is it.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you.
Afternoon, Bishop. Thank you, Reverend Paul Dunn. We appreciate being in this beautiful house of the Lord and being with you today. In a minute, one of my close friends and one of my heroes, Eddie Burke from the United Mine Workers of America, is going to speak. I just want to say just a couple of quick things real quickly. I was glancing through the word last night, trying to get ready for this, and a workman is worthy of his hire, Reverend Liz, is mentioned in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, in Matthew, in 1 Timothy, the Bible is full of workers being treated with dignity and respect. Why is that too hard for us to do and for Joe Manchin to do? You cannot talk about being for workers in West Virginia if you're not for the poor, because half of the workers in West Virginia work for poverty wages and suffer every day just trying to keep their kids fed and going to school. And what kind of human being can be against a child tax credit? What kind of human being can be against lifting children out of poverty? They never did nothing to nobody. They never wasted time. They're just trying to grow up.
Yes, sir.
And you condemn them to poverty and hunger. This is a working class issue because in West Virginia, half the working class lives in poverty.
Yes, sir.
In a minute, my friend Eddie Burke is going to talk about the fights in the mines and in the mountains to win for mine workers what other workers want as well. Health care, a better way of life, and a living wage. All of that is wrapped up in the Build Back Better plan. But you know, there is no real social justice without economic justice. Just as there is no democracy without voting justice.
Hook them together. Hook them
You
together.
got to hook them together.
Yes, sir.
There is no real political democracy without economic democracy. Dr. King said it very well. What good does it do to be able to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford the hamburger? Right? And so we need absolute freedom, eagerness, want to, people voting, people expressing their hearts and their desires, and singing and saying with their voices how to make this a more democratic country.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm coming to the end, and I'm sorry I've taken so long, Brother Bishop, and we appreciate you and Liz coming and spending so much time in our state. It means so much to us, and you have lifted our hearts and the desires of our hearts for us and helped lift us up as you have. It's very clear.
Yes, sir.
You cannot serve West Virginia.
Cannot.
If you like poverty and hate the poor. Our state is poor for a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with hardworking people.
Teach that. That's it.
Our state is poor because of coal colonialism. Our state is poor because of corporate masters, corrupt corporate masters who've cared nothing for West Virginia and nothing for the people of West Virginia. And Joe Manchin sups at their table every day and every night. He is the senator of the ruling class, not the senator of West Virginia. So good to be with you this morning.
Remind them who you are.
I'm Stuart Acuff from Jefferson County, West Virginia. I am the retired organizing director of the National AFL-CIO.
Yes, sir.
It's great to be here. Thank you all. Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you, Stuart. Brother Anglican Bishop.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it there today. We have a lot of rain down here. When there's rain, the creeks start flooding. So we are stuck here, but I'm there with you in spirit. And I want to speak today, and I want to thank you for inviting me, the bishops, the elders, all the leaders, and you, the faithful, for having me with you today. I just can't believe that we're having to meet yet again on something that our senator, who is supposed to support this community, is supposed to support the people of West Virginia is doing to block the poor here in West Virginia. The poor here in Kermit, the poor here in other counties, Mingo, Cabell, Wayne, all of these counties that depend on our leaders to support them, to support their needs. And this legislation, it's detrimental to the needs of my people. I go to the Holy Scriptures and I find that it directs us as people of faith to strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy, not to cripple it, not to put it away, not to hide it behind closed doors, but to strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. To Senator Manchin, we're tired of compromise with no change. You wouldn't even support your own legislation when we tried to compromise with you. And so I say now, Senator Manchin, it's time for us to go back to the old landmark, and stop toying with all the needs. We need Build Back Better. We need voting rights for the people here in West Virginia. Communists, when they came to power, were the first to remove voting rights from people. We don't want a communist West Virginia. We don't want a leader that is directing us to go against what it is that we know in our hearts that we need. And we need this child tax credit. My own children have benefited from this wonderful thing. So it's time, Senator Manchin, to stop blocking voters' rights, to stop blocking necessary legislation for the poor in West Virginia. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who gathered here today that have stood up for this cause and have made your voices clear for this cause. And I give my time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Lark. Now we'll have, Bishop Lark. Now we'll have.
Let me thank the Right Reverend Lark Muncie with the Holy Trinity Anglican Church. He's a recently consecrated bishop and represents churches up in the poorest areas of West Virginia. And now, my dear friend from, we all in the movement, we're friends, we're brothers, we're sisters. So Eddie Burke is coming, retired field director of the United Mine Workers. And I've been talking also to Cecil Roberts, who is the president in support. And we've been on the front line with you all. So come on up, Brother Burke. Let's give him a hand as he comes. America better get ready when the miners and the ministers start coming together.
Nice. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Eddie.
Really happy to be here today. It's I've been retired for a while, and I went to your rally a few months ago, back in the fall, and sort of got that itch again.
Uh-oh.
And black lung is a vital part. It's a terrible disease. It's a vital part of Build Back Better.
That's right.
There's a small provision in there that extends those benefits until 2025. There's recent news articles about how, there's people worried out there. There's like 40,000 recipients or their family members out there. I'm not an expert on it. I have some personal knowledge because I was married on a Saturday in 1969, and I went on strike for about 4 or 5 weeks on Monday. So I always remember my anniversary because the miners had to take it to the streets or to take it to the hollers, really. And I was part of about 5,000 people walking up to Canoa Boulevard. And guess what? People make a change when they come together. And West Virginia, later in March of '69, passed the first black lung bill. And had it not been for Ken Heckler and Congressman Carl Perkins down in Pikeville County, they kept shepherding the national federal black lung law. And that was all because of miners saying enough's enough. And I can't say how that connects more important than those 3-year extension on those benefits. And I just look forward for us to work, how we can all turn that into, voter reform is definitely important. No one, the old saying of beware of Labor Day, because they wanted to tell you everything you want to hear then, but you never hear about it after Election Day. And we sure need to come together, and I'm excited to be part of that. Thank you.
Brother Burke. Thank you, man. Thank you. Well, Burke, I've never had a chance to really thank the miners. My grandfather was here in the early 1900s and was a miner. I got to do some research. We think he might have been up there in Blair Mountain. So one of these days we're gonna have real conversation. Yeah. All right, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, our co-chair, powerful co-chair. And then after that, Adam Thurson, low-wage worker from New York. And while we're connecting together, and then the Reverend Jackie Lewis from Middle Church. No, you. No, thank you. You can use. Come on, step away from the mic.
Good afternoon. I come before you this afternoon from the great state of New York. We're calling on Senator Schumer, my senator, and Senator Manchin, many of the people in this sanctuary, Senator, to do the right thing, to show which side they are on, and to come together with that Senate to pass a full Build Back Better program, to restore and expand voting rights, to end this regressive filibuster, and to lift from the bottom so that everybody rises. I am a pastor, an organizer, a preacher, biblical scholar, and a mom. My kids go to the public schools in New York that are in desperate need of resources. My friends don't have the healthcare or wages that they need. And all of us are impacted by this attack on democracy. Reminds me of Jeremiah 6. They dress the wounds of my people as if they are not serious, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. Since the beginning of 2021, hundreds of attacks, voter suppression laws have been introduced in states across the country. Since 2021, when an administration, a Senate, a Congress came into session that had pledged to lift from the bottom, to address systemic racism, to raise wages, to expand voting rights, and still has not. We see that they're saying there's peace when there is no peace. I want to read this letter that has been sent, is being sent to Senators Schumer and Manchin today. We write on behalf of the people of West Virginia, especially its 710,000 poor and low-income residents, as well as the 140 million poor and low-income people across this nation, to request that you, Senators Schumer and Manchin, meet with a delegation of impacted people from West Virginia and New York, faith leaders, economists, voting rights lawyers, and others from the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival. We are writing on the 152nd anniversary of the passage of the 15th Amendment that guarantees that the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude, and that the Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. For more than a decade, there has been a coordinated effort across the country to abridge the voting rights of Black, Latino, Native, and low-income white Americans. Despite 19 states enacting laws that do this in 2021, the Senate has failed to meet the moral urgency of the moment and pass federal voting rights protections. Today, it seems the focus of some senators is to do the least rather than the most for justice. In this political atmosphere, the rights of millions are being denied and abridged. Congress must move past outdated Senate traditions and act now to save the country. We write, concerned that people are suffering needlessly. Our voting rights are under attack because we exercised them to vote for change in 2020. Too many have put the interests of wealthy corporations over the needs and demands of the people and blocked the Build Back Better agenda, including a full child tax credit without work requirements or restrictive means testing. Across the nation, the failure to extend the child tax credit will be devastating to tens of millions of poor and low-income households. In West Virginia, the failure to pass the Build Back Better agenda means that 23,000 children will be pushed below the poverty line. It means 110,000 workers will not be able to make ends meet, and 10,000 jobs will be denied in the state. In addition, 441,852 Medicare beneficiaries will not be able to access expanded insurance in West Virginia alone. Among these are retired minors who desperately need this health insurance. Senator Manchin, you campaigned with promises to expand voting rights.
That's right.
To bring jobs to West Virginia, to help our people who are crushed by this poverty. But your actions are hurting us and millions across the country. Senator Schumer, the obstruction by Senator Manchin is hurting New Yorkers, including the over 819,000 children in poverty who desperately need the child tax credit in New York State.
Teach that.
Build Back Better would bring vital jobs to the parents of 1.2 million children who do not have job security. It would provide necessary upgrades to the Veterans Affairs that have 213,000 veterans in your state in need. Full voting rights are necessary in New York, as across the country, where residents continue to face barriers to same-day registration, access to absentee ballots, other abridgments of voting rights, including requiring party registration for voting. We want to say to both of you, it is time to call the question. It is time to publicly answer, which side are you on? It is time to go back and pass the full voting rights protection and expansion bills, the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act and the For the People Act, before the ones amended by Senator Manchin failed.
That's right.
It is time to go back, overcome the regressive filibuster, pass the full 3 trillion Build Back Better agenda, not one reduced to 1.7 trillion, or what is being compromised on now. Some say this is not how Washington works,
That's the problem.
but maybe that's the problem. As religious leaders, as impacted people, we cannot compromise the lives of our parents, grandparents, children, and neighbors. We hold the entire Senate responsible for this sinful refusal to act that is producing deep suffering. The party in power and the senators who could have used their power to do the right thing are especially guilty.
That's right.
But there is a way out. Impacted people from the hills of West Virginia and the neighborhoods of New York have the moral authority to help the Senate regain its honor and human decency. Senator Manchin, you are willing to meet with corporate executives and political lobbyists.
That's right.
Meet with us.
Meet with us.
Some of the 340,000 low-wage workers in West Virginia and their families. We are suffering because the Senate could find trillions in less than 2 years for corporations, but can't protect voting rights, nor invest a few trillion over 10 years in the people. Senator Schumer, listen to the people of West Virginia and New York coming together. Remember, poor and low wealth people represent over 30% of the US electorate. Fortune 500 companies produce 13.7 trillion in GDP. But without the 140 million poor and low wealth people, 43% of adults, 52% of children, there is no country.
No country.
There is not any corporate wealth. We desire to meet with you before it's too late. As is signed. Oh, read the statement. Okay. Signed by Reverend Dr. William Barber, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, Jean Evans Moore, Tri-Chair of the West Virginia Poor People's Campaign, Pamela Garrison, Tri-Chair of the West Virginia Poor People's Campaign, Stuart Acuff, West Virginia Poor People's Campaign Committee, Coordinating Committee Member, Kristen Olson, West Virginia Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee Member, Sally Roberts, West Virginia Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee Member, Matt Kerner, West Virginia Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee Member, Sharon Hellman, West Virginia Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee Member, Pastor Paul A. Dunn, First Baptist Church of Charleston, West Virginia, the Right Reverend Lark J. Muncie, Holy Trinity Anglican Church in Kermit, West Virginia, Kelly Smith, Tri-Chair of the New York State Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee, Reverend Wes McNeil, Tri-Chair of the New York State Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Liz. And before we come to our New York speakers, this letter is already out and it's already the media, and now it's going up on Action Network, and thousands of other people will be joined to sign this open letter. We do what we do in the open. We're not back room, back door, hide behind folk. And it is a moral call for them to meet with a delegation from West Virginia and New York, the very people you hear speaking from this podium today, who can literally give a way out of the mess that we're in. Adam from New York, low-wage worker, love you, my brother, and then Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, and then I want to put a wrap on this and take questions from the media. If Adam is not there, is Adam there? We don't hear you yet. Sorry. Reverend Lewis, are you there? Brother Adam, are you there? I think I see you talking, but I can't hear you. I think you're on mute. Reverend Lewis, are you there? All right, if they're not there, let me put a wrap on this. I'm Reverend Dr. William J. Barber. That's just a thing. You know, you say your name, they always tell you to remind. In other words, don't be scared. Let them know that you don't mind them knowing your name, your address, where you are. But I really want to talk some about today, this 152nd anniversary, February 3rd, 1870. And I looked back last night, Jean and Stuart and Reverend Dr. Dunn and Pam, on how all these compromises happened even in the 1870s that almost undermined the 15th Amendment. And it's amazing to see the same foolishness going on. I mean, they left women out. There was an attempt to say that you couldn't deny people's right to vote based on their income. They left that out. There were a lot of senators that didn't even vote. It didn't even vote. At some point in this country, if we don't stop this foolishness, the country is going to implode. It's going to literally implode. It can't hold the stress that we're seeing now. And when you see Senator Manchin and the Republicans and your other senator, what's her name? Capito. And they've got a commitment to this, first of all, this filibuster. And they use it to block voting rights. And they use it to block investments in the lives of poor, low-wealth people and minors, like what you see in the Build Back Better plan. An investment in child tax credit, an investment in living wages, especially after a senator like Manchin ran on these things, lied to the people to get elected. He literally said, if you elect me, I'm gonna be for living wages. You elect me, I'm gonna be for voting rights. I wasn't here when he ran, but I know we sat in the room with him. The video last year, he said, I have a plan to do voting rights. I can get Republicans. That's what, you remember he said that, you know, and then we checked the record. He signed the For the People's Act while John Lewis was alive. I mean, literally signed off on it as a co-sponsor. But as soon as the majority says, what I think is he would do that stuff because he always knew his good buddy Mitch McConnell would not let it come to the floor, so he could sign off as though he supported it. But then once the majority flipped, Democrats were in control. That's when the Chamber of Commerce and the others started sending that money in and saying, okay, we're calling in our markers. We're calling in our markers. But I want to go a little bit different. Not different, deeper. Pastor Dunn, something you said prompted me. Senator Manchin, you and the other senators, like Mitch McConnell, have stood in a non-constitutional, sinful tradition that wrongfully claims the filibuster is the essence of the Senate. And not only is this inconsistent with how Jefferson, Hamilton, and others believed, and they had their flaws, the truth is the filibuster has always been the essence of the politics of white supremacy and labor rights and union rights enemies. That's the filibuster was designed to do two things: to enable white supremacy and to block labor rights and union rights agendas. Manchin says he's acting like Robert Byrd, but Robert Byrd repented. So you're not acting like Robert Byrd, and we're gonna call that out today. You know, Robert Byrd had his flaws, but it came a point that he repented. You're not acting like Robert Byrd. In fact, if you read the truth, and media, you all should call Manchin on this. Senator Manchin, when he says he's acting like Robert Byrd, take that for me. Robert Byrd actually hated the kind of coward filibuster that Manchin is hiding behind. Robert Byrd said that the filibuster ought to be a fight, and that it should not be something that you don't have to defend on the floor of the Senate. Robert Byrd would call Manchin a coward. What now? The truth, however, is Manchin is acting like, and because I love him, I want to say this to hope he'll shift. We don't have hatred of him as a person. We hate these policies. Manchin is acting like John C. Calhoun, not Robert Byrd. John C. Calhoun was vice president in 1841. He forged the filibuster into a conscious instrument to block majoritarian democracy. He believed that the South, and particularly the slave masters, were a legitimate minority that should have the power to overrule the majority. Name was John Calhoun. He believed in minority rule. He believed that the wealthy and the greedy aristocracy should have the ability to overrule the people. He did not believe that the majority of voters should have the last words in the United States. Like Calhoun, Manchin and McConnell believed that certain subgroups, back then it was those who own chattel. Today it's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's the greedy, profit-driven people. They actually believed, like in Calhoun's day, that this small group of people, Pastor, should be allowed to veto legislation, no matter how popular or how right the other legislation was. This position is undemocratic. This position is totalitarianism. This position is sin. And so today, we want the media and others to be clear. We stand, first of all, in the grand tradition of God, the grand tradition of faith and the prophets and Jesus that says that a nation will be judged by how, and if I could put it in these terms, you filibuster and block the treatment of the least of these. You're going to be judged by how you filibuster around and block and steal from the poor. But we also stand in the grand tradition of West Virginia. Manchin isn't even living up to this day. I understand why he's out there on a yacht, because he really doesn't represent Manchin. It was West Virginia that said no to Virginia when Virginia seceded from the Union. It was West Virginia that stood up and said, no, that's undemocratic. That's wrong. You don't break the Union up over something that shouldn't be in the first place. And they would not go along with the secession. We stand in the grand tradition that the first 28 states to ratify the 15th Amendment, among them was West Virginia, and West Virginia was number 2. And it almost was number 1. They ratified 2 days after Nevada. Nevada was March 1st, 1869. West Virginia was March 3rd, 1869. And then we stand in the grand tradition of the repentant Robert Byrd. The Robert Byrd who even in his unrepentant days still had enough sense that if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna at least bring some money to West Virginia. Yeah. Give me that cash. You know, the one thing you gotta say about Robert Byrd is he made sure that the money came to West Virginia. Huh? That the poor folk in West Virginia were not left out. I mean, I don't agree with some of his early position, but you got to admire that part of it. Huh? And then we stand in that tradition of him saying, if you're gonna have a filibuster, you're gonna go to the floor and you're gonna stand there in front of the American people and you're gonna defend your position until your body can no longer defend it. And then we stand in that tradition. I remembered, I was young, but my father made me watch it. He was sick. Robert Byrd was sick. And they couldn't get past the Republican cloture. It was in 2009, the critical vote. He had already said, he endorsed Obama. A lot of people don't remember that. Robert Byrd endorsed Obama over Clinton. And when Clinton won in West Virginia, he still said, but Obama's gonna win the election. Oh yeah. And Robert Byrd knew that his vote was needed to ensure what we now call the Affordable Care Act. As Pastor Dunn, he was sick and he went to the floor and said, this closure, we gotta have it. He said, I'm gonna vote to break this filibuster. His friend Ted Kennedy had recently died. And Robert Byrd said, for my old friend, Ted Kennedy, who'd been fighting for health care for all people for all his life, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President of the Senate, I. And he broke that closure. Manchin ain't breaking closure. He's holding on to closure. And Robert Byrd did that December 24th, 2009, and gave all people, many people without health care, a Christmas gift. Instead of standing in that tradition, Manchin is standing against West Virginia and for the greedy and for the power. He's standing against the 42% of West Virginians who are poor, the 757,000 residents, the 692 white people. And I want to make a point of that. Now, last time I checked, Manchin was white. I mean, at least I don't know what his ancestry, because like me, I'm black, white, Tuscarora. But I mean, on the surface, he seems to be white. And he claims to come from the Hill, but he's voting against 600,000 white people. Yeah. In this state, the top 1% grew by 61% since 1979 to 2012. The bottom 99% stayed stagnant. He's standing with the 1%. There are 53,000 veterans in this state that have incomes below 35,000. They would benefit from BBB. He's standing with them. 35%, 33% of West Virginia's veteran population, he's standing against them. 133,000 people uninsured, he's standing against them. 46% of the water tracts in West Virginia are unable to afford water. He's standing against them. 1,300 people homeless, he's standing against them. You got to work 66 hours in this state at minimum wage as it is now to afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment. He's standing against low-wage workers. 352,000 workers make less than $15. He's standing against that. He literally, as one person, is standing against 50% of the workforce in this state. 326,000 people are on food stamps. He's standing against them. But you know what he will vote for every time? The war economy. He will vote for more money for war, but then he will war against a $15 living wage. And since the Iraq-Afghan war, $19 billion has come out of West Virginia. $19 billion for Iraq and Afghanistan since 2001. If that money had stayed here, it could have created 15,000 new jobs in clean energy and could have covered the cost of Medicaid for 349,000 adults. The other day, Manchin voted against his own compromise. I'm like you. I don't get. You work in the back room to compromise. The only thing I can figure is he did the negotiations to give the other states time to pass their laws. So he slowed the process down. It wasn't really ever a negotiation. And then when he had the opportunity to vote for his own compromise, he said no. And now yesterday he said BBB is dead. Now let me say what that means and I'm through. He's saying child tax credit for 31 million families is dead. He's saying earned income tax credit for 17 million families is dead. He's saying paid family leave is dead. Help for minors is dead. 4 million more families getting health care, people getting health, dead. Hearing aid, dead. Teeth for people that need them, dead. But Senator Manchin, you just overstepped your boundary because you ain't God. You just overstepped your boundary because only God can speak life and death. It might be delayed, but it ain't dead. Our deadline is victory. There have been a lot of times through history, I don't have time to go through it, when folks said things were over, but their pronouncement was actually simply the beginning of movement building. Ain't nothing dead because God ain't dead. As long as God is alive, Pastor Dunn is alive. Long as God is alive, the miners are alive. Long as God is alive, the Poor People's Campaign is alive. As long as God is alive, there's a remnant in the earth. As long as God is alive, there's some freedom workers. And I declare unto you today, I'd get on the right side of God and do the right thing. Or otherwise, one day, you will be a forgotten senator. But people will have their health care. People will have their living wages. I say to you what Dr. King said at the end of the march to Selma to Montgomery. God's truth is marching on. And it never sounds retreat. And we will have ultimate victory. Everything we celebrate today, labor rights, Social Security, all those things, there was a moment in time when people said it was dead. It was impossible. It was over. You don't have the votes. But they forgot to factor in one thing: God mobilizing his people into a grand chorus for love and justice and truth. Senator Manchin, the very fact that you said things are dead is now our call to mobilize, not never before. Okay, we're gonna have to take questions now from the media because they've been on for a while. I'll try to work in, Reverend, and just say, are there any questions from the media?
A question from Bob Henley.
Bob?
He particularly wanted to speak to the Build Back Better plan.
Yes.
Okay.
And you're with, would you identify yourself?
Oh, sure. I'm with the chief leader, Salon, and WBAI, Reverend. Thanks for having this important call. According to
Yes,
research
sir.
done by the United Way, that's the, you're familiar with the United Way ALICE program that tracks folks that aren't below poverty, but struggle week to week. It's asset limited, income constrained, but employed. There are 5 million households right now with children that struggle week to week to make ends meet, who have yet to file for this child tax credit in the American Rescue Plan. This could mean $3,600 for these households, which are still eligible for the benefit, even though Congress let it expire going forward. Is this something the Poor People's Campaign can get the word out on? There's a network of nonprofit tax preparers who can help folks get this money if they file their taxes. Could be a great time to also register people to vote if they are not already.
I think that there's more complications to that as to why people haven't filed, the message getting out, what wasn't done to really get the message out. Also, the programs have ended now. So all of the things that they started last year have ended. But I want to let an economist talk to you about really what's at stake with the child tax credit, and none other than Shally Gupta-Bond, who works with our economists and our policy team. Would you take this question? Somebody wipe that off before she comes.
Thank you, Bob, for this question. What's at stake with the child tax credit was what we've heard already, that 61 million children were receiving this benefit month to month. Parents, low-income families that had never had access to this program because they were too poor to pay taxes finally received this benefit. For the first time, 27 million households who never had it before, disproportionately Black and Latino households, finally were able to receive hundreds of dollars a month for a number of months. And now that's, we need to get the people who weren't able to access those credits. There is a way, as you're saying, to have them signed on and do that before tax season, before the end of this fiscal year. And we need to do that. And importantly, we need to secure the expanded child tax credit program in this new BBB legislation. It cannot include restrictive means testing. It cannot include restrictive work requirements. And that's exactly what Senator Manchin is proposing and is now winning other congressional colleagues over to. Both of those things would kill some of the best elements of this program, some of the life-saving, life-giving elements of that program. And so that's the other point we need to raise and talk about constantly when we talk about the child tax credit and what's at stake right now with the Build Back Better agenda.
Talk a little bit about why means testing is so wrong and the fact that they didn't means test any of the corporations when they gave them trillions of free dollars.
There is this is the point. Means testing basically puts a cap based on who can access the program based on how much you earn. And it's measured against the poverty line most of the time. And the poverty line's too low. So what means testing does, it's say, well, if you're above this line or right around this line, you have the means to not afford this program. But because the line is too low, the program limits are too low and the number of people who access it are too low. So the programs are never big enough to meet the need at hand. And like Reverend Barber, and we've heard, has said earlier, there is no means testing for military spending. There's no work requirements for tax cuts for the wealthy. So why would we impose? Why is this logic inverted to put on the people who need these programs the most, poor and low income people who may not run this country, but who make it run every single day. And so that's what, that's what we're confronting right now. It's bad policies, immoral policies justified by bad and immoral economics, rooted in bad and immoral narratives that have only hurt the poor, and we're not going to stand for it anymore.
And so you heard Charlie even go deep. Now I said 31 million families, but she's one about 61 million children. And it's gone. It ended. You just stop, quit. That's the ugliness of all of this. Billionaires made $2 trillion in the last 20 some odd months, while 8 million more people fell into poverty. And here's Manchin saying now, his latest thing was if they took out the child tax credit and the family leave, he might support the Build Back Better. Just another trick and another lie. And it's important that the media expose how he's hurting his own people, because he keeps lying. I'm doing this because I'm doing it because this is what West Virginians want. That's why we're demanding a meeting with him and Schumer in the same room with people from both states, New York and West Virginia. Another question? Or is there another question? No more questions? Okay. Thank you for members of the media. We're going to come back. Adam, if you take your 2 minutes, and Jackie, if you take 2 minutes, and then we're going to close out. And Lauren is going to give final instructions to members of the media that are still on. Okay? Adam?
Hi there. I'm grateful for this opportunity. My name is Adam Thiessen. I'm a low-wage worker living in New York City. My income is not enough to support myself and my partner while she's in school. I work as a barista for a large hospitality corporation at the top of the One World Trade Center. Every day, I pass dozens of unhoused people on my way to work. People sleeping in the subway to stay warm, people shivering outside, people who have no place where they are welcomed. Then I take an elevator high in the sky and I pour coffee in a cafe where I cannot afford to eat. Out the window, I look down, both physically and morally, on New York City's financial district and the hundreds of billions of dollars that's changing hands there. Inside the cafe, we're reminded that society looks down on us. We feel this when customers don't look us in the eye, and we feel this when management callously makes decisions that negatively impact our income and our lives. The company we work for pays us as little as they possibly can. To this company, we are not workers, we are not human beings. To the company, we're just a line in a budget. We deserve better. I work with people whose shifts and commutes take up more than 12 hours of each day. We all see each other much more than we see our own families. But because of this, strong relationships are built. We hear and we feel each other's pain. We all understand that we are all hurting. It can be easy to simply accept this reality and think that there's nothing that can be done about it, but there is. I'm proud to be able to say that I'm a member of the labor union Unite Here, Local 100. We're currently negotiating.
Adam, can I ask you a question? I want to ask you a question about, in your position, why you and your other fellows believe that we must have expanded voting rights and why we must support the Build Back Better plan. That's the focus for today. And I want to ask you directly that question. Why from your position?
Sure, we need voting rights. That's how we exercise the power that we have. That's how we can actually affect change. I know that in the last election, if we had, I think it was 20% more voters from the lower income electorate, that we would have been able to change some of the outcomes. Voting,
that's right.
A lot of poor folks that I've come across don't feel like voting will change anything. Don't feel like, well, what's the point? Things have always been this way. They're always going to be this way. But when we build these relationships, person to person, when we talk with each other, when we get in groups like the Poor People's Campaign, we have these meetings and this education. People can begin to see how voting can actually help. And you know, what I tell people all the time is that if voting didn't matter, they wouldn't be working so hard to make it hard to vote and closing all
Say
the
that, Adam.
precincts and all this.
That's exactly the point, Adam. And can you speak one? I want to get to Jackie so we won't lose our media people as well. Why poor and low wage workers need to build back better when it provides more health care and provides paid family leave and provides child tax credit. Could you speak to that and why you are glad as a New York worker to be connected with folk in Appalachia and West Virginia?
Sure. Well, I feel the solidarity with the people in West Virginia. I know that geographically we're far apart, but economically we're neighbors, brothers and sisters and siblings. And sorry, I've got people coming in. We need Build Back Better. We need these expanded voting rights. It's a trauma. We are all under anxiety because of COVID and everything else. But when you put the economic oppression on top of this, and how none of us are able to make ends meet, we're in debt, we're struggling, we're cut corners, we're live as frugally as we possibly can, and it's still not enough. And we need this Build Back Better plan. And so, we need to demand that my Senator Chuck Schumer call the question and bring to an immediate vote the For the People Act and a Build Back Better plan that includes a permanent child tax credit, a family leave, and a living wage. And we demand the full restoration of our voting rights. We demand economic justice.
And we want you in the meeting when we meet with them. We're calling on them to meet with us, look us in the face to get together. Reverend Jackie Lewis, would you share with us as our final presenter? We're sorry that we had technical difficulties early.
It's okay. Hello, my brother. Hello, my friends. Hello, God's people everywhere. I'm Jackie Lewis, and I live in Senator Schumer's state. I am the senior minister at Middle Collegiate Church in New York. I took a trip to Mississippi last summer. Took a trip around the South, checking in on the historic sites of where my people, your people, worked to change the nation into the democracy that it had been promised. I went to St. James Chapel in Willville, Mississippi, where Fannie Lou Hamer sang in a choir with my mother, where my great Uncle George, her uncle's name, is on the outside of the chapel as a trustee. I don't know that George Jordan was with Fannie Lou Hamer the day that she left a training in North Carolina, but then went to Winona, Mississippi to just stop and get a bite to eat, and was beaten for 4 days by policemen, beaten by other imprisoned Black folks because she dared to believe that she, as a poor Black sharecropping woman, deserved to lift up her voice to vote. Now, none of us right here are having the John Lewis beating on the Pettus Memorial Bridge. None of us right here are having the Fannie Lou Hamer beating in the Winona jail. None of us here are experiencing those excruciating violences of snapping dogs and water hoses sprayed on children just standing up to be free. None of us here is sitting at a lunchroom counter being beaten over the head with ketchup bottles and salt shakers. But make no mistake about it, we are being beaten down. We're being beaten down by politics, by compromises, by fear, by timidity of our electeds, by our leaders. And we must demand that this John Lewis Voting Right Act be passed so that our voting rights are restored. We must not be timid. We must not be shy. We must not compromise. We must not hide behind platitudes that somehow the filibuster is for minority folks. These tactics are not new. They just have on cleaner clothes. These tactics are not new. They just seem to be polite. And what I'm saying to all of us who are within hearing of this voice is our job right now is urgent. And we must, each of us, stand up and claim our inner George Jordan, our inner John Lewis, our inner Martin King, our inner Ella Baker, our inner Fannie Lou Hamer, and say that we will not abide these injustices. We will insist on our voice being lifted up, and we will demand the passage of this voting rights bill. We will demand it, we will insist on it, and we will vote out the people who don't understand how important our vote is. This is our calling. This is what God expects. And we will speak out until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Thank you so much, Reverend. Thank you so much, Pastor Jackie.
Thank
We're
you,
thankful to
Pastor Brother.
all of our, amen, the media and all that have joined us today. We're going to continue to be mobilizing. There are a few things we're not going to say today. We're going to have some meetings, but there's some stuff coming down the pipe. We're going to be able to campaign, continue right here in West Virginia. We're going to be here for a few days. Liz and I are going to be joining Pastor Dunn and this fine church and the members here. Senator Manchin, Senator Schumer, meet with the people. Meet with the people. Meet with the people. Because the people will eventually meet with you, either in the streets or at the ballot box. But what we will not do is quit until justice comes. God bless you, everybody. Thank you so much.